Good evening and welcome to our Facebook Live event, Speech, Language and Literacy. My name is Reinhardt. I'm a speech pathologist and the owner of North Shore Speech Therapy, which is a paediatric speech therapy clinic on Sydney's North Shore. I'm also the mother of now 13-year-old twins. I just want to start by saying a massive thank you and shout out to Northern Beaches Mums for hosting tonight. They have done an awesome job at keeping us all informed and connected, and especially so during lockdown. So thank you, Northern Beaches Mums, for organising and for hosting tonight. While we wait for everyone to log on, I'm interested to hear from you about the ages of your children. So to help me get to know you a little bit, I would like you to write two things in the chat, please. The first being the age of your child or children, and the second being the craziest thing that lockdown made you do or buy. I'll go first just to kick us off. As I said, my twins are age 13, and the craziest thing that lockdown did was make me dye my hair blonde, which is why I may look a little bit different from the advertising material you saw. Okay, over to you. Take it away, please. I want to know, how old are your children, or how old is your child? And craziest thing that you've done in lockdown or bought. Welcome, Nicole. We've got a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old. So it's a busy night for you. Well done for making it here to the Facebook Live. Did you do or buy anything to keep yourself from going crazy? Oh, very nice. Nicole bought a coffee machine. Lovely. And Kate, welcome. She bought a dog. I don't think you'd be the only person who bought a dog during lockdown. Virginie, welcome. 5 and 8. And becoming addicted to mojitos, understandable. And have we got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, just to be clear? Yeah. Wow. Okay, Samantha, welcome. Samantha has a 2-year-old, and by the sounds of it, a lot of fish. So there's been some sacrificial fish going on. It sounds quite biblical. So we've got a nice age range already. We've got from 18 months through 2, 5, and all the way through to 8 so far. So if you're just joining us now on the Facebook Live, I just want to get to know you and the ages of your children. So if you can, pop in the chat how old your children are, and also the craziest thing that lockdown made you do. To get organised, I'll come back to the chat in a moment. It is really nice to meet you all. I'm so pleased that you are online for this workshop. 0 to 5 years of age will be quite a focal point of this evening. So basically 0 to 5 years of age is the critical language learning period. So it's a time where your baby's brains are like little sponges ready to absorb the sounds and words and sentences of language. Too often parents are told, "He's a boy, don't worry about it. They're always late to talk." Or maybe, "They're twins, of course they're going to be slower to talk." Well, this advice from well-meaning friends and maybe some mothers-in-law, it can mean that often parents don't take the action that they need to take when they should. So the point of tonight is to cover ages and stages and milestones for speech and language development so that you can make an informed decision. As a speech pathologist, I have a passion for language. I've seen firsthand what happens when children don't have the communication skills that they need in life. As a mother of twins, I also understand the struggle to find time and energy and headspace to give to our kids. So I hope tonight you find it super practical, that it's useful for you as we look at what is important in communication development and why. Now, I have my lovely friend and colleague, Kate, behind the slides, and as technological as we are, live streaming to different Facebook pages, we're not that technological with our slide change. So when you see me do this, it means change the slide. So Kate, if you can change the slide for us, and after that we'll make it much more subtle. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover tonight. As I said, most of the focus will be around the 1 to 5 population, but we will cover from 0 through to 7 years of age. I'm going to keep it super practical as we explore communication. And as we go, I want to give you practical ideas so that you can help your child's language and literacy skills grow, whether or not they're having difficulties. The information that I'm going to present to you is based on research and the best available evidence that I've read, along with my own clinical experience. And I'm going to try and answer the questions based on the information that you provide. However, I can't say enough, it is always best to get your own professional advice from a speech pathologist who can conduct a thorough diagnostic assessment. So take things tonight as a guide, but please do your own investigating with a speech pathologist if you have concerns. I want to keep things as informal as possible over a live stream and relevant to you and your children. So as we go, please pop your questions down in the chat and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So the more you put in, the more you will get out of tonight. If for any reason we don't get to your question, on our website, there's a link in the chat. And if you click on that link, it will take you to our website where we have a section. If you scroll down to the bottom, the very bottom, there's a lot of content there. But if you scroll down to the very bottom, you can insert your question and someone from my team will get back to you within the week. So if we don't cover what it is that you are interested in, please do go to our website, scroll down to the bottom and submit your question there. Okay, I think we've given enough time for everyone to log on. So let's get cracking. Ah, you're already there, Kate. Okay, I'm wondering how many people tonight have met a speech pathologist before. Just to clarify, a speech therapist and a speech pathologist and a speech and language pathologist, it's all the same thing. So maybe give us a thumbs up if you have met a speech pathologist before. For those who haven't, our name isn't a great reflection of all that we do because it's so much more than just speech, as we'll cover tonight. But the summary is that we assess, diagnose and treat any form of communication and feeding difficulties in both children and adults. Although at my clinic, North Shore Speech Therapy, it is all about kids. So let's have a look at what makes up communication, because it's so much more than just words. When we talk about communication, if we were to try and break it into neat boxes, we have speech, which is basically how clearly your child speaks. Language, which is looking at what they say, the words they choose, the grammar they use, and if they understand what they hear and read. Then we have play or social skills, and actually play is essential for developing language and for interactions. And we can actually, if a child is nonverbal, we can have a look at their play skills and actually glean so much information about their language development just from play. The other section, there's always another section, section hearing, which is required for language development. And also attention, which can be impacted by multiple factors like hearing and language understanding. Likewise, attention can have an impact on multiple areas of learning. Okay, we have ages and stages for each of these areas, and it's important to know if your child is on track because usually one skill precedes the next, and communication has one of the biggest impacts on a person's quality of life. So let's start with our first part of communication, which is speech. So when we're talking about speech, we're talking about how clear your child sounds or how easy it is to understand them. Another word for speech might be articulation or phonology. So some things to know. Articulation is looking at the way that you move your mouth to form the sounds of language. Poor articulation means poor intelligibility. And articulation is important not just for speech clarity, but also for developing literacy. And in particular, if children are having trouble saying what we call multisyllabic words, which is a multisyllabic word, That means a word of lots of syllables. If children are having trouble pronouncing all the syllables in a word, that is actually a red flag, and really is important to see a speech pathologist. So I'm going to give you some benchmarks. Now, I know that it is impossible to remember after one session all the sounds and what age they develop. So we're going to go with, I guess, a more general guideline. If you are sitting with a 9-month-old at home, we would hope that your 9-month-old is babbling in beautiful consonant vowel chains like this, ba, 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 ga, ga, da, da, and that they're making eye contact. If they're not, have a hearing test and consider speaking to your GP about seeing a speech pathologist. Another benchmark, it's their 3rd birthday. Happy birthday, blow out the candles on the cake. Now we want your child to be easily understood by people outside of the family, right? Because at age 3, children can actually pronounce about 75% of adult speech. So they should be pretty clear in their talking. So if you have a 3-year-old and people often look to you to interpret for your 3-year-old, then it would be worth having their hearing tested and consider seeing a speech pathologist. Age 4, that's when we want those multisyllabic words to be clearly spoken. Children shouldn't be having trouble with that anymore, and really most sounds are in place. Age 5, now we're ready for school. So we want them saying all their sounds correctly, except for the TH sound. So it's okay if around 5 they still say, I think that's a great idea. They can keep doing that until they're 7.5. Unless it's interfering with their literacy or they're not feeling so good about their speech. So entering school, all sounds in place, which means no wed wabbit, no lisps, thilly, thally, like that. That should all have, if it was going to develop, I guess, naturally without intervention, we'd expect that to have happened before school. And I think sometimes parents might leave it and say, oh, we'll wait and we'll see what the teacher says. The thing is that school won't actually address their speech. So, as a parent who's had children starting school, I know how busy it is, and it only gets busier. So you're best off intervening before they start school and getting those sounds crystal clear, except for the TH, we can wait a little bit longer. So sometimes parents will ask, I think it's that my child is lazy. He can say it when I remind him to say it. If I tell him to pull his tongue in, he'll pull his tongue in, or whatever the sound is. But, he chooses not to do it. And I get a little show in the chat if this sounds familiar. If you think, look, he's just being lazy. Getting some hands up here. Yeah, sometimes. I mean, why wouldn't you think that, right? If they can do it sometimes, but then not all the time. The thing is, it's, I always say if your child was lazy, they'd get it right the first time because then they don't need to repeat themselves. But I guess changing your speech pattern is a lot like changing your posture. We all know, oh yeah, in fact, even now tonight, whoops, I'm meant to be sitting up straight. We know we're meant to be doing it, but thinking of doing it is another thing. And for your child, when they're under 5, they don't really think about a word and think about, oh, I wonder if the S sound is coming up in this word. Children, their brains actually aren't wired to do that just yet. So it's more likely that, yes, they can say the sound in isolation when it's not in the word, and maybe that sound's developing, but changing your speech pattern is difficult. And that's why speech therapy, we sort of, we go in stages. We start off with the sound by itself, and then in words, and then in short sentences, and then in longer sentences. It's all done very systematically, and it's kept super fun because children do not like doing things that they find difficult. So it's unlikely that they're just lazy. It's more likely that, hey, it's actually quite tricky to change a motor program, and that you're better off doing it with the experts by your side. We can always tell when children come to the clinic and maybe parents have tried a little bit too hard or for too long to try and get them to correct their speech. So I think it's important to keep it fun and trust the professionals with it. It'll make it go so much quicker. So you might be wondering what you can do at home. Oh, Kate's changed the slide and I haven't. Hang on a second. I was like, Kate, change the slide. 1 second. There we go. You might be wondering what you can do at home. Children learn to speak by looking at you, looking at your facial expression, watching your mouth, and then having a go at saying the same speech stream back. So if your child is speaking and they're lacking clarity, get down on their level, make sure you're making eye contact and speak slowly so that they're able to follow your speech stream. Now, one thing you can do is model the correct way of saying the word. But there's the right way of modeling and the not so right way of modeling. I'm going to show you both ways, and I'd like you to take a vote on which way is the right way to model. So let's imagine that your child looks up at the sun and says, "It's a ton." That is actually a common speech error called stopping. Let's say they do that. They go, "Oh, it's a ton." All right, way number 1, you say this. "Ton? Oh, no, ton means really heavy." That's what a ton is. If something weighs a ton, it's super heavy. So that's not a ton, that's a sun. Say sun. Okay, that's way number 1. Way number 2, your child looks up at the sky. They say, "It's a ton." And you say, "Yes, a sun. The sun is shining, nice and hot. The sun is in the sky." All right, quick vote. Jump in the chat. Tell me which way is better, please. Way 1 or way 2? Prue has said the second way. Kate has said the second way. Oh, champion Sarah Tantum has said the second way. Well done. Absolutely right. What is it about the second way that you thought was better? So way number 1 was when we said, "No, that's not ton. Ton means it's really heavy. You should say sun, say sun." And way number 2 was, "Yes, it's a sun. Sun is in the sky." What made it better? There's a few things to that second one. Thank you, Kate. So Kate has said the second way was more positive. Absolutely. You guys know your toddlers well. And how many of them like to hear the word no? In fact, how many adults like to hear the word no? So the moment someone starts a sentence with no, well, then you get the out the door, shutting down, not interested. When we start with yes, it's far more likely that your child is listening to what you're saying and is going to take in that model. And I have to tell you that modeling works beautifully for speech sounds, and it also works for new words. It works for any part of communication. So you can do this for sounds or words. And you start with the word yes so that your toddler goes, "Oh, I like this feeling. I'm going to keep listening." Then they're receptive. And as you've said, Prue, it doesn't complicate things. Instead of saying, "Oh, no, it's not a ton. Ton means very heavy." No one's listening, right? Instead, it keeps it nice and simple. You go in and model the correct way with lots of repetition. So absolutely. And Jimmy's put there, so they know what it really is and don't get confused. Yeah. And I think what you and Prue are both tapping into there is also the fact that my sentences were shorter in the second one. Short and sharp, repeating the word the right way. Now, it's not so easy to start your modeling with yes when your child has said something that sounds so different to the real word. So if I can challenge you now, if your children are still awake, to try it with them, or first thing tomorrow, put it into practice. When they say something incorrectly, you say yes and then model it the right way. I've put in there as well to avoid saying to them, "Say it like this," because if they could, they would. If it was easy enough for them to do in their everyday speech, they would. So try and avoid that one. Just modeling the correct way is plenty. If the word is a nice long word, you can break it into syllables and clap it out. Even a word like yellow, if your child says lello, which is quite a common one, sometimes breaking it into syllables, yellow, yellow, might work. If you find it doesn't work, stop there. Your child will say it when they're ready, or you might need a little bit of a hand from a speech therapist. And I've actually left it with stop if you get any resistance. Okay. One of the causes of speech difficulties, not the only cause, and but one of the common causes is a condition called glue ear. And glue ear is actually a buildup of fluid in the inner ear. It's a fluctuating hearing loss. So this is not the hearing loss that if your child is born with a hearing loss, it's not that hearing loss. This one is a fluctuating one. And it's actually, I read somewhere that it's the most commonly undiagnosed condition in the preschool population. And I don't know how they got that stat, because to get that stat, they'd have to diagnose it. But there you go. And it can affect hearing by up to 60%. And it's actually present in roughly 30% of preschoolers. So you've got this buildup of fluid in the inner ear, and it can be like hearing underwater. So I've put this in tonight. I'm not an audiologist. I happen to know we have a lovely audiologist online. Hello, Lindsay. But I cover it tonight because it is so common and it can affect hearing by such a large amount. So most of the time, if you are worried about your child's speech or language development, we would recommend that you have a hearing test first, just to rule out any fluctuating hearing or hearing loss. But there are some signs that you might notice along the way. So the sorts of things that you might see, first of all, any deterioration in your child's talking. So if your child was babbling beautifully and then stops babbling, or if they're at the 1 year mark and they were starting to use words and then they stopped. If they start dropping the beginnings of words, any deterioration, children's speech and language should always progress, not deteriorate. So if you see a deterioration, first thing to do is have their hearing checked. Dropping parts of words in their speaking. Sometimes children will speak quite loudly, maybe because they can't really hear until they're loud enough. They might have sore ears, so you might see them pulling or rubbing at their ears. They might experience frequent colds. And if your child is a mouth breather, you know, where they sit like this. So children should, and adults should actually be able to breathe with their mouth closed. But when there is an obstruction, maybe large adenoids or some sort of obstruction in the upper respiratory tract, then children will breathe through their mouths. And that can be a sign just to keep an eye out on their hearing, keep an ear out. I'm about to go to another speech issue, and this is probably a good point. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat on anything that I've covered so far. So the speech sounds, modeling the correct way, and hearing. If you've got any questions. Oh, Samantha's sharing with us that they had grommets put in last week. That's excellent, Samantha. You'll probably see a swift increase in their speech and in your child's speech and language now. It happens really quickly. For those who don't know, when children have this glue ear, the buildup of fluid in the inner ear, because it's on the inside of the ear. So we're not talking about wax here. It's on the inside of the ear. So if this is the eardrum and this is the outside, it's here. The only way to get rid of that, well, there's a couple of ways, but an effective way of getting rid of that fluid is with grommets, where they actually put in little holes in the eardrum to drain out the fluid. We have a question here from Prue regarding speech. So Prue said that her 5-year-old has a lisp. The GP says not to do anything about it until he has his adult teeth. Is that correct? It's certainly not the approach that I would take. So at 5 years of age, it's a good time to treat a lisp. I love it when children are missing their front teeth, because I feel like it's a window into where their tongue position is. So if you think about it, when you make the S sound, if you do it now, your tongue tip, you might feel it. It's not actually pushing up against your front teeth. It's a little bit behind your front teeth. So I don't mind if there are baby teeth or missing teeth. I like to work on the S actually at that stage because I get to see. But that is my own personal opinion on it. We know that if children have not grown out of their lisp by age 4.5, that it's time to start treatment, and why not start before school? I'm just giving you guys a minute there if there are any more questions coming through. We're going to cover one more area of speech before we move to language. And this area I cover because it can happen all of a sudden, and the area is stuttering. So this is not related to hearing in any way. So put hearing aside for now. This is a speech disorder they don't actually know the exact cause of, but it has a large genetic component. So the reason I cover it is because between 2.5 and 4.5 years of age is the usual age of onset for stuttering. And it can be quite scary for families. Your child can be speaking beautifully and they go to sleep and they wake up the next day and they're stuttering. For some people. Others, it's a gradual onset. Others have stuttered since they started talking. So it's different for everybody. There are different types of stutters. There's the common one, which is called repetitions, which I did for you there. And that's where a sound or a whole word, or even sometimes a group of words or a phrase is repeated. So those were all repetitions. They're the most common form of stuttering, and I think the most obvious, but I'm not sure. It's up to the individual. The next one I'll do for you is prolongation. And that's where the sound is stretched out past where it should be. It's considered a more significant form of stuttering than the repetitions. And then there's a block. And that's where you can see your child is going to speak, knows what they want to say, but nothing is coming out. And that one can be quite difficult to watch your child going through. That is considered a more severe form of stuttering. And there can even be some non-verbal sort of tick-like actions that are associated with stuttering. So children might have eye blinking or a sharp intake of breath, and they can say a lot. We call that using a filler word. And I always stutter when I'm talking about stuttering, standard. So there we go. These are the different types of stutters, and it's good to be aware of them so that you can look out for it in your child. If they do start stuttering, don't worry. We usually would intervene for stuttering if your child has been stuttering for roughly 6 months. We might start earlier if it's particularly bothering them. So we've had some children who've said, you know, oh, I can't get my words out, I can't talk, and it's actually a little distressing for them. So then we would intervene earlier. The ideal treatment age is in the preschool years, so between 3.5 and 5 years of age. There's more and more research coming out on stuttering all the time. So if your child is stuttering, it's best to speak with your local speech pathologist about it. I can't remember the stats. I think it's maybe 52%. Don't quote me on that. But many children who start stuttering will grow out of the stuttering or become fluent without needing therapy. It's just that we don't fully know, who will grow out of it and who will need treatment. So that's why we say it's okay to wait and see for a little bit in some cases, and then, maybe 6 months and then start treatment. But it does depend on a lot of things like family history, whether your family member grew out of their stuttering or needed intervention, the severity of your child's stutter, and their attitude to talking. Now, there's a lot of fake news out there about stuttering. So this last bit on stuttering, I just want to do some myth busting. And probably the main one, if you ever watched The King's Speech, I loved that movie. The only problem, they really depicted adult stuttering well. The only problem was they kept looking for a cause to stuttering, an anxiety-provoking event or some trauma. But stuttering is not caused by trauma. It's not caused by anxiety. It's also not caused by copying siblings. So we do often hear that the parents might say, oh, he's just copying his older brother. Whilst it might seem like that, it's unlikely that your child will be able to change their speech pattern entirely to be like Big Brother. It's more likely that there is a genetic component to stuttering, and therefore it's probably a genetic thing, probably. It's also not a reflection of your child's intelligence in any way. So just want to point that out. Whilst it's not caused by anxiety, it is often made worse when a child is feeling anxious. In fact, there are a few different times that so stuttering can fluctuate, and a few different times that you might see it increase. So if your child is anxious, if they're tired, if they're getting sick, or if they're competing to talk. So if there's another sibling in the house or they're excited to tell you something, then you might see the stutter increase. And that marks the end of our section on speech. Before I move on, if you do have any questions about stuttering and want to pop them in the chat, because we're about to put speech away and move to language. Checking our messages coming in, and we are good to move on. Okay. Language forms the foundation of all learning. Big statement, right? But we can actually use the number of words that a child has at age 2 to predict their later language and even their learning ability. So what is language? Well, I'm going to split language into neat boxes again, these 3 defining areas. So our first area, we've got receptive language, then expressive and pragmatics. Very quickly, receptive language is what your child understands. Expressive language is their output, the words they use, the sentences they put together. And then pragmatics or social skills, these are the unwritten rules of language that people just get until they don't. And then it does become quite apparent. But you can see in each of these rainbow-colored columns that words form the building blocks, the foundation for more understanding and more language ability. Before we change slides, we're about to move on. We're going to play a guessing game for ages and stages. So what we'll do now is have a look at how language develops in those first 3 years of life. And my first question is, how many words do you think is normal for an 18-month-old to use? So if you're sitting at home with an 18-month-old, you can do a quick count and pop it in the chat. How many words do you think an 18-month-old should use? Thank you, Nicole. 10 to 15 is the guess. Thank you, Sarah. Jimmy Choose, 10. Let's have a look. 30. Kate, you have a very advanced 18-month-old. I wonder if we're talking about Lulu here. Okay, so let's have a look at the answer. On the next slide, an 18-month-old, what we would expect is that they're using a minimum of 20 words. Well done, Sarah. These words, they don't need to be clear. They just need to be consistent. So if your child, every time they see a chair, they say tear, that's fine. It still counts as a word because it's consistent. And for our families who are speaking multiple languages, if your child says chair in English and chair in Korean, that's 2 words. Okay? But so when you're counting words, in fact, people have often talked about for bilingual families, you know, that their child might be slower to pick up language. But it's more likely that they're building vocabularies in 2 or 3 different languages, and each word counts as a word, even if it is for the same item. Okay, some other things to look out for your 18-month-old. So we want them using a minimum of 20 words, and that when you say an object, they're able to point to that object, and that they're interacting well with eye contact and babble. And that they're starting, you can see almost that they're wanting to put sentences together. If you have an 18-month-old who's not using 20 words and isn't looking like communication is developing, then have their hearing checked and see your local speech pathologist. All right, we're going to go to our next age, which is our 2-year-old. So what is the minimum number of words you'd expect a 2-year-old to use? And I've just had information there is a lag on our Facebook page, so go a little slower with letting you guys answer. So minimum number of words that we would expect for a 2-year-old. We've got a range coming through. 40 to 50, Karen. Jimmy's put 40. Not bad, Northern Beaches parents. Let's have a look. Age 2. The answer is 50. Now, there is this thing called the language explosion. And this is where you'll know it when your child hits it, because they lay down new words all the time. It happens really quickly. I actually still remember it when my twins went through it because it was so exciting. And it usually starts around the 18-month mark. So by 2 years, they've already gone from having 20 words to 50 words. And we need them to have 50 words because the day they turn 2, happy birthday, blow out the 2 candles on your cake, we want them putting 2 words together. Big ball, mummy, go. So in order to be able to find 2 words, to have 2 words to put together, they need their vocab to be of a reasonable size. So if your 2-year-old is not putting 2 words together, have their hearing checked and see your local speech pathologist. Okay, next one. How many words should a 3-year-old use? If we've gone from 20 words to 50 words as a minimum, what would be the minimum we'd expect for a 3-year-old? Nicole's come up with 150. Let us have a look. We can flip over Kate. 200 from Prue, 100 to 300, 500. Would you have guessed 1,000 words? Talk about a language explosion. So between 3 to 5 years of age, we see a big variety in the number of words that children have. And someone once asked me, do you actually sit there and count them? We do have tools to sit there and count them, yes, but we probably don't need to count them all because what we look for is your child able to express themselves in the way that they need to get their message across? So things that we look for with our 3-year-olds is that, remember that benchmark when we were talking about speech, that they're easy to understand by people outside of the family. And we look that they're playing with other children, that they're doing a lot of pretend play, which is where they sort of imitate the routines of life, like feeding Teddy and putting him to sleep. We're now looking for long sentences. 5 to 7 words is the minimum for a 3-year-old in their sentences. They're understanding concepts like opposites, empty, full, high, low, and their grammar is developing as well. Okay, next question. On average, how many words do you think a child needs when they're starting school? And Nicole shared with us that's why her daughter is never quiet until she falls asleep. Yeah. We spend so long wishing that they would start talking. Then they start talking. We're like, oh, will you ever be quiet? They do get quiet again when they're teenagers. Okay, how many words to start school do you think? No one's game yet to guess. I'll give it away. Let's change the slide. The answer is, here they come. It's that lag, 3,000, close. Nicole on the money. It is 5,000 words. On average, children start school with 5,000 words. So if you think about it, they start talking at 12 months. They enter school at age 5 with 5,000 words. So they go from 0 to 5,000 in 4 years. I hope my maths is right there. Anyway, that's a lot of words to lay down. And yes, we do count them. Now, this is not a workshop on school readiness. If you would like a workshop on school readiness, we're going to ask you at the end of this Facebook Live, and we can certainly do that, host a workshop on school readiness. But there are some things there for you to have a look at if you do have a child who is looking at starting school. I guess the factors that go into, there are so many factors that go into whether or not to send your child to school, especially if your child is young for their age. So we've put some benchmarks up there. Every child is unique. And if you are sitting on the fence, I would strongly suggest you, obviously, and you've probably done this already, speak to your daycare or preschool teacher. They see a lot of children all of the same age, so you can be guided by them and their experience there. And of course, at any stage, you can reach out to a speech pathologist to assess school readiness. From a speech pathologist perspective, the things that we look at, first of all, we'd also speak to your daycare or preschool teacher. But the areas that we assess, first of all, would be speech clarity. Will other children understand them? Because we want them to have a great start and feel confident. So they need to be able to be understood. Language comprehension is another area. So can they follow the teacher's instructions? Do they understand concepts like before and after, or greater than, less than? Because that will impact on their maths and all areas of learning. Language expression we assess. Can they explain themselves? If something happens on the playground, will they be able to go to their teacher and talk about what's happened? We assess social skills as well. Are they going to be able to follow school routine, follow the rules, cope with change, manage anxiety? We also look at early literacy skills, which is phonemic awareness, if you've heard of that, basically the awareness of sounds within words. So in that last year before school, children should be able to clap syllables, tell you if words rhyme, identify the first sound in a word. And we also will have a look at their attention and listening. If you think about a school day, they do need to be able to persevere with a difficult task or sit at a table for 15 to 20 minutes. A lot of it they learn on the job too, but these are the things that help to get ready for school. As I said, that is a whole nother 1 hour workshop at least, but hopefully that gives you some information. I made a big blanket statement, which was that language forms the foundation for learning. But I would challenge you to think of a subject that doesn't involve language. It's tricky over the live because we do have a delay in the feedback in the chat feed. But usually I ask, is there a subject that doesn't involve language? And people in the past have said maths, music, but maths is just so rich in language. Concepts like columns and rows, addition, subtraction, etc. Maths is a language subject. And when parents ring concerned about their child's language, I often ask, well, how does he go in maths? Because it does tell us so much about the comprehension of vocab and concepts. Music, I am really bad with music concepts, so I don't know all the Italian words, but it's a whole nother language and a language that needs to be understood in order to lay down the concepts. So all subjects use language. Asking to go to the bathroom in class takes language. Following the routine, following a timetable, it all takes language. So one of the reasons it's so great that you are all on tonight is we can look at how we build up words and sentences to help your children now as they're young, all the way through to that school start. So we're going to have a look at turning your home into a communication station. I've put a school age slide in here. Thank you, Kate. Just so that you do have, I thought there might be a couple of parents of older children online, so there are some norms there for you. I guess the thing to note is that when a child has an unresolved language delay, that often leads to learning difficulties. In fact, most of the time it does. 13% of students in New South Wales schools have an identified language disorder. So if you think of a class of roughly 25 kids, we're looking at 3 kids in a class. And it might come out in different forms. Maybe you'll see it as difficulty with reading or poor spelling or just reluctance to write, trouble with maths. But very often we see it as, might come out as poor behavior and even school refusal, right? And I guess the thing I want to point out is that when children are delayed with their language, it's usually in the absence of impairment of IQ, meaning that you have a bright child sitting there who's not understanding, and they know they're not understanding. And so that child, maybe it's that they're not understanding or not able to express themselves. So it can come out in different ways. But no child that I know of wakes up in the morning and thinks, gee, I'd like to disrupt class today. Or if they're younger, I really hope I bite someone today, right? Children don't think like that. It's not a planned thing. Usually their behavior is because they don't have the words to express, hey, I'm having difficulty with this. But, you know, especially if they're sitting there of average intelligence, then they're not understanding why they don't understand. And that would be quite a frustrating feeling. So if your child is having trouble in the areas that are listed on that slide, or if you're concerned about their behavior, think about language. Too often it's missed. Okay, we're going to do some top tips now. Top tips for building words, sentences, and pre-literacy skills. And I've split this into two groups. So we're going to do our 0 to 3s, and then we'll do our older children. So I think I've made it quite clear that one of the things we really want to help you to do is build words, because words are the building blocks, the foundation skills. So 0 to 3s. Do you have 20 minutes to spend one-on-one with your child? Because if you do, you know, this is a great investment in their language and learning future and quality of life. So roughly, if you can sort of think about finding one-on-one time, 20 minutes in the day. You've got to aim for the one-on-one, but of course that's not always a reality. So if you do have more verbal children around, I guess just be conscious to give your child the time that they need. So you know, in my house with twins, I always used to think of myself as the train conductor. If they were on the back seat or we were playing together, I would have to say, Reese, shh, Maddie's turn. Yes, Maddie? Mm-hmm. And we would do something. Okay, Reese's turn. Yes, Reese. And of course, they didn't play together. That would have been too easy. But really directing the conversation, and even still now we have to do it at the dinner table. Hang on, whose turn is it? But I think it is important, because if you have a child that is more language able, or an older child, and now you've got another one on the way, that older child is going to might speak a lot for your younger child who's still developing their skills. So it's important to give them that opportunity to have time to hear a word and say it back, because that's what builds words. Hearing the word in context, having a go at saying it back. So limit during this 20-minute time, if you can limit background noise, TV off, radio off. I always call it the comfort TV. You know, you go into some homes and the TV's always on, and it's just for comfort. That is actually just a habit. So if you turn the TV off, they don't need the comfort TV. And the reason that we want to limit background noise is so that your child can clearly hear the speech signal that's coming through. This is the hard part. You've got to follow their lead. So we know that kids learn best when they're interested. So, you know, even if you've bought them an amazing fire truck and you really want to play with them with this fire truck, but they're more interested in the box that the fire truck came in, well, you've got a whole lot of box time ahead of you, because we know that they lay down language better if you're giving them the words to match what they're interested in. So I've put this picture up of the little girl feeding the, what is it, a polar bear? Polar bear. And that's just to give you an example. If, you know, if you're following your child around, you want to give her the words to match that experience with lots of repetition, short sentences, and an animated voice. So it'll sound a bit like this. Feeding Teddy. Yum, yum. Teddy's hungry. More. More, feed Teddy. Oh, Teddy's so full. Teddy, have a sleep. So you can see that I'm speaking in short sentences with that sing-song intonation. Their brains are wired to process that sing-song intonation. It's not baby talk. So, and I don't like putting on baby talk, but you all know what baby talk is, right? Oh, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, it's not baby talk. It's just using short sentences in an animated way to keep their interest with lots of repetition. I found this one really hard, but you want to avoid testing them. It's not the HSC. You've got plenty of time for that. So just give them the words to match match what they're interested in. So we don't say things like, oh, what's that? And then your child says, spoon. Yes, it's a spoon. Well done, right? They're not going to be laying down any new language. If you ask them, what's that? They're either going to get it right or wrong. But, so you're either going to say, yes, well done, or then it becomes almost like you've broken that communication. Oh, no, it's a spoon. And as you know, they don't respond well to starting with no. So try not to say, what's this, but rather give them the words. And another one not to forget is singing together. Singing together with hand actions. So Incy Wincy Spider, if you're happy and you know it. It's a great way for them to lay down words like body parts. There's lots of repetition, lots of emotion words in there, and they really enjoy it too. So singing with your child and doing the hand actions are the top tips. Bath time is a great time for the 20 minutes of one-to-one because they're contained and you can make it really fun. And I thought this was a good picture because, there's words in there like bubbles, pop, duck, and again, body parts, splashing. So there's verbs and nouns in there. Great way to build the vocab. But also we want to keep it varied. So whilst bath time is good, we want to, expose them to as many different words as we can. So on that next slide, I've just got some outdoor play there. That is a wonderful opportunity for building vocabulary. If you think about the sorts of words you might use as you're giving this little girl the words to match her interests: pouring, stirring, spoon, dirty, dry, clean. There's so much language. It's a language-rich activity, that. And this little boy pushing the car, this is actually for adding on. So if your child, I thought it was so great, that picture, because it looks like he's saying car. If your child is at the one-word level, I'll just see if we go to the next slide or not just yet. Hang on a sec. Actually, I'm going to come back to him. Sorry, the one thing I wanted to talk about was taking turns. So when you are walking around and you're labeling what your child is doing, you do want it to be interactive. So you want your child to be looking at you and communicating with you. You stop and listen. You've got to model listening, otherwise they may not pick it up. So you listen and then you repeat back. So if your child is at that babbling stage, da, 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 you would say to them, da, 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 back. Or you could even say, yes, we did have a nice day. Or even, yes, we are going to woi woi. So having that conversation, letting them speak to you, and then you speak back, that turn taking is really important. You'll judge it by the age and stage of your child. Okay, now I want to show you adding on, which is that little boy, and he's got the car, and he says, let's say he's at the one-word level. We know that children can understand one more word than they're currently using. So if he's at the one-word level, so just using one-word sentences, he can understand 2 words, right? So the idea of this adding on is that you add on one more word to what he says. So let's have a look at the next slide. So if he says car, you say, yes, fast car, drive the car, mummy's car, Johnny's car, etc. So there are some different categories there that you can add on one more word. If your child's at the 2-word level, you can make it a 3-word sentence. So it's a great little strategy to practice at home. Like anything, it does take practice. Easiest way as well to expose your child to new words is to read to them. And let's have a look why. So this is the amount of reading that you need to do and the number of new words that you're exposing your child to by reading. So if children are not read to, then you can see they're exposed to roughly 4,662, not so rough, new words before they enter kindy. But have a look what happens if you read to them just once or twice a week. And then a nice, realistic 1 book per day. That's a lot of words. The good thing about reading to your child is that there's such a variety of vocabulary in there. Now, I have a whole nother workshop on ways to read with your child. We won't have time to cover it tonight, but if you are interested in it, pop it in the chat, and we can certainly look at running a Facebook Live at ways to read with your child. because 0 to 3-year-olds, we're not reading them a story, right? They can't follow more than, one more word than what they're currently using. So there is a skilled way of doing it so that they remain interested in books. But I guess the thing to point out is right now you can set up a nighttime routine where you eat dinner, have a bath, your child chooses 2 books, and then off to bed, right? You can set that routine up now. And it's probably, if I were to think back on one bit of advice I would share, it would be set that as a routine. Don't introduce screens, certainly not after dinner time. We know that it hypes them up and prevents them going off to sleep. But more importantly, you really want your child, at age 7, my kids were putting themselves to bed and reading themselves to sleep. Not because I'm an amazing parent, although I'd love to give myself that credit, but because we set up that routine from the very beginning. Dinner, bath, books, bed. So yeah, as they get older, it gets easier and easier. There's nothing nicer than sending them off to bed with a book. But it does take, I guess, it's got to be purpose driven. So we will not cover book sharing at this point as we are nearing the end of our Facebook Live. I'll just share some of the books that they will enjoy in that 0 to 3 age range. Look for books that have something tactile, maybe a lift the flap book, a touch and feel book, toddlers' words books, etc. Those are the sorts of books that your child might be interested in. Don't worry about the story at this point. If they enjoy hearing your voice, and those Harry McClary books that you have a lovely lilting voice with it and it rhymes and you have a lovely experience reading those with your children, great. But if they're not interested or they're slamming the book shut, that's them telling you, I'm not understanding what you're reading. So it's more about having a lovely book experience with them in this 0 to 3 age range. Now, I haven't forgotten our parents of slightly older children, our 4 to 7-year-olds. So I will spend I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes with this, and then we will talk about multilingual families, and then we'll open the floor to some questions. So language tips for our 4 to 7-year-olds. I'm going to pick one from this next slide, and that is how to give an instruction so that your 4 to 7-year-old will follow it. Now, I'm not going to put it in writing that they'll follow it because, there is a behavioral component. But if you deliver an instruction in this way, we know they've understood it. And it's called holding up how many fingers. Okay. So the instruction looks like this. Let's say, I'm trying to think how old for this one. Actually, it doesn't matter how old they are. We'll do a 2-part instruction. So, Johnny, I want you to get your slippers and come downstairs. What will you do? And then Johnny says, get my slippers, come downstairs. Hey, great listening. Off you go. Now, if Johnny's able to say that instruction back to you, you know with 100% certainty he's heard you, he's processed it. Whether or not he follows it, as I said, I can't put that bit in writing. So the idea is that you keep to 2 fingers and a maximum of 3. If you find you're running out of fingers and you're going on to the next hand, your instruction's too long. So we know that 2-year-olds can follow a 2-part instruction, but if you're keeping it around that 2-part mark, you're safe that he's going to be able to hold on to it, process it, and then carry out whatever it is. So it's important to get them to stop what they're doing. Even though many people can multitask, we want them to stop, focus on you, hear the instruction, and say it back. Okay, the way that our 4 to 7-year-olds lay down new words or learn new words to be able to say is a little bit different to our younger ones. So the younger ones, it's about hearing it and having a go at saying it back. For our older ones, we want to talk about words. It's called metalinguistics. And I break it into these 4 areas. So let's say our new word is the word whispering. You're reading with your child and the word whispering comes up and they're not quite sure what that word means. If you just remember these 4 areas, talk about the sounds, talk about the meaning, put it in a sentence, repeat. 4 fingers. Here we go. Sounds, meaning, sentence, repeat. So if it's the word whisper, it might look like this. Johnny, the word is whispering. Let's clap the syllables. Whispering. Great. So if he's able to say that back to you, you know that he's going to lay down the word. If he can't say it correctly or each time he says it differently, Well, he's not going to lay it down because he needs that repetition. Then we do the meaning. Whisper means to speak really quietly with no voice. So you give them a simple definition. If you can remember this next bit, this is the key. Tell them the opposite. The opposite of whispering is shouting. That's right. Give them some context. Where do we whisper? Yes, in the library. Now we're up to sentence. Put it in a sentence. I whisper in the library. Oh, well done, Johnny. Can you say the word? And you have him repeat it. If you can remember those 4 things, I'll say them one more time. Talk about the sounds or syllables, the meaning. Don't forget the opposites. Put it in a sentence and have Johnny repeat it. And that way, I'll almost put in writing that he will remember that new word. On our website, we have a section called resources, and I've put actually I can't claim the credit. Kate has put up there a blog that we've written about books for 3 to 6-year-olds. I think there's books for 0 to 3-year-olds on there as well, and tips for reading with your little ones. So please do go onto our website, which is speechtherapy.com.au. If you go to the resources section, there's all of these books and recommendations up on there for you. And we put them up to date so that you would be able to go on there if we didn't have time to cover them. Okay, I am going to skip down to the bit, if I was popular, I'm now going to become unpopular. So we're skipping to what does a meal look like in your home? I just want to give you some food for thought here. Here it is. We know that children learn words through hearing them and having a go at saying them back, right? We know that children learn language from your model. So I want you to hit fast forward 10 years from now. You're sitting with a group of teenagers. They're your kids. They just grew up. What do you want that meal time, or what do you want that family time to look like? Because whatever you want, when you hit fast forward, we've got to start it now. Now, it's never too late to put in place a new routine. But just have a think about the message that we do send our kids, right? If I stop what I'm doing and just go, oh, hang on a sec. Yes. Okay, I'm all yours. If I do that, I'm sending the message that it's okay to then get distracted, then come back and leave that person hanging, right? So I guess it's just about being aware. Phones are so much a part of what we do, and we have them all the time. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't addicted to my phone. Of course I am. And that's just the thing. They're highly addictive. And kids' brains, they're still forming. They're addictive for us as adults. Can you imagine for this newly forming brain? So it's just about putting in place routine and rules and structure around it. So I guess it's just thinking ahead and think about what you want for your family. There's a lot of great language. Talk about a language-rich activity, sitting at the dinner table and you sharing your day. And I've been doing that at my dinner table since the very beginning, talking to them, I really had a hard day at work today. I work with this person called Kate, and I just felt like she wasn't listening, and guys, what do you think I should have said? And even just modeling out your own thoughts, your feelings, what you're experiencing during the day. The kids are picking up problem solving, new vocabulary, and the language to discuss feelings, which again goes so well for quality of life. So just a little food for thought there. We'll skip down just to our learning more than one language. This will be our last slide. You've all done very good listening, I have to say. And I just wanted to cover this because so often families are told, but don't teach your children multiple languages. They'll get mixed up. Again, fake news. Giving your child another language is one of the greatest gifts you can give them. It's definitely not a disadvantage. If anything, it's an advantage. Language is such an important part of culture and identity, and we want your child to connect with older relatives, other family members. So it would be rare that a speech pathologist would advise you to drop a language. It would only be in quite an extreme case that would ever be advised. Just some rules with introducing another language. Always speak in your strongest language. That is super important because studies have shown that when you try and speak if it's your second language, you don't speak as much. And that way children aren't exposed to the great variety of words that we need them to be exposed to. So always speak in your strongest language. Keep the language use consistent, which means, separate out. So you might say, it's Greek time now, we're going to speak in Greek. And then when you're ready to move to another language, now we're going to speak in English, let's speak in English. And you can actually label right from when your children are born, Greek time, English time, and separate them out. Never mix the languages in one sentence, because then your child might get confused about when to use which language. It's really quite incredible the way they sort it out. I've seen families speaking 4 or 5 languages, and the kids very quickly learn who to speak with, which language with. That's part of the beautiful, their brains being like sponges right now. So it's a good time. The earlier you can introduce another language, the better. Anything else on the multiple languages? If your child is speaking one language and you introduce another one, you may get a silent period as they're finding their feet with the new language, testing it out, learning the new words. That doesn't mean they're going to be behind. And I think that's probably all on the multiple languages. Does anyone have any questions on that? It's usually one that I guess that people do want to know about. One question that's often asked is, how do we know if they're on track with their language when 2 languages are in use? And there we look at the rate that they acquire the next language. So as you know, children should be laying down multiple words every day really quickly, remembering them, not regressing. So we look at that when we're doing our assessment. We don't need to speak the second language to do a language assessment. We work with parents and interpreters if we need. All right. Lovely. Well, that has taken us to the question section. The end, that was a whirlwind look at language from 0 all the way to 7. I hope that you have enjoyed it. If you want to stay and put some questions in the chat, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you for being here tonight. And fire questions away. And of course, if you want to log off, good evening. No worries, Kate. Thank you for joining us. So if you have any questions, fire them down in the chat. Thanks, Nicole. It was lovely having you online tonight. Thanks, Samantha, and thank you for participating throughout. Lovely to have you, Renee. All right. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great evening. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you at our next Facebook Live.